actor, writer, and longtime BFF, Zuzanna Chatkovsky.
Hi. Hello, everybody. You guys excited to be here? I am too, and I bet you're very excited to see and hear from my best friend in the whole world, Andrew Rannells.
This is distracting because there's just like a screen of us.
Oh no,
right
we can
here.
see ourselves.
Just two actors staring at themselves. This is not
Let me
going to be
fluff
good.
my hair.
Now let's be like, is this a good look? Legs crossed? Let's try that. Thanks so much for being here today, you guys. This is this is our first BroadwayCon.
Yeah, our very first BroadwayCon.
This is
Our
our
very
very
first time on stage together having a conversation.
Yes, we've never had a conversation
Holding microphones.
holding microphones. Maybe like a karaoke room at some point, but this is it. Zuzanna, thank you for talking with me today.
Well, thank you for having me. I don't know what my title, I'm moderator, I guess.
You're a moderator. Well, and Zuzanna actually just got back last night from the very place where we met, which was the Young Arts Foundation, which is where we met. It's a college scholarship program. Anybody know Young Arts here? Yes.
Yeah?
It's great. We both were scholarship recipients from Young Arts, and Zuzanna's now on the board of Young Arts and goes down there every year to talk to the kids.
The young artists.
The young artists, exactly.
Yes, so we met many years ago, and we've been friends for, how long is it now?
22 years?
We've been friends as long as many of you have been alive.
Longer. Sorry, Glenda.
Okay. But yeah, we basically kind of grew up together in New York, so I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but Andrew Rannells has authored a book.
I indeed.
Here's a little mock-up, and here I have it.
There's
Too
the
much
book.
is not enough.
Too much is not enough. Does anyone know what too much is not enough refers to? Yes, that is right. Was that Sarah? Yes. Sarah, you were correct. It is a line from Fame, the movie Fame, which I'm sure a lot of you know. Irene Cara, yes. But this is Zuzanna is all over this book.
Yeah, I'm like a major player in this book because this book chronicles the sort of formative years of your acting career and kind of as you became like an adult human.
Yeah.
So tell us what years of your life it chronicles and why you kind of focused on that.
It more or less starts in 1997 when I first moved to New York to go to Marymount, Manhattan, to go to college. And Marymount. I later dropped out, but that's what brought me to New York, was to go to Marymount. So the first chapter is literally my first day as like living as a New Yorker. My parents dropped me off at a really sad dorm, and then just left me. And that's sort of where it takes off. And then the book ends when I was cast in my first Broadway show, which was in 2004, and it was Hairspray. So that was a lot of time in between my arrival in New York and my debut on Broadway.
A lot of adventures.
A lot of adventures. Zuzanna and I sang at a lot of piano bars that no longer exist. Zuzanna once did a monologue at a piano bar because she was
I don't know if anyone's done that. I wouldn't advise it. It's not exactly what they're intended for. But yeah, we were basically like young upstarts trying to find ourselves in the city. We both came from the Midwest. Are any of you guys Midwesterners? Just moved to New York? Yeah.
Any Indiana?
Yeah,
That's me.
Any Nebraska? Hey, Cornhusker.
Yeah, so we came here to kind of, find ourselves and become actors, and that's kind of the story that you get to go on with Andrew in this book. And, I think that you wrote so much about your young years, and I'm wondering how much you think you kind of learned about yourself from writing.
A lot. I mean, it's a lot of, the book gets very personal very quickly, and I cover a lot of ground that might be surprising to some of you, but I felt like it was important to sort of include all of those stories in there because that was a big part of those years. But I do feel like I saved myself some money in therapy having to go through all of that, because as it's happening to you, as you're a young person and certain things are going on, you don't always sort of absorb it at the time and sort of how it's going to affect you. But now, all these years later, looking back on it, I was like, oh yeah, I can see where that actually did kind of mess me up for a while. Maybe kind of froze me in time for a second. And so it was very helpful to go through all of that and to get to share these stories. And I had an essay from this book published in the Times, as did Susanna. She also had an essay published in the Times. For Modern Love, our friends at Modern Love.
Thank you. Andrew is my part-time publicist.
But to me, it was a very personal story, and I thought a very unique story, and that it was a story about, I was on sort of a very regrettable second date with a guy that I really had no intention of having a third date with, and I was like, why am I doing this? But just hanging out with this guy, and that was the night that my father died. He ended up, I got all these phone calls that he had this heart attack, and I was ignoring all of the phone calls because I was on this date. And then when we finally got home, back to my apartment, and I listened to the voicemails, because there wasn't really texting in 2000.
No, there was not.
It was something called T9 Word, for those of you who so no one was texting me, they were just like leaving these voicemails, and then I had to deal with this news while with this stranger in my home. And it was a very odd story, but after that story was published, I was shocked at the number of people who reached out to me and said, I have a similar story.
Yes.
So I was surprised by that was sort of, I thought it was this very specific moment that no one else could have had, and it turns out a lot of people did.
Yeah, I think that specific is universal, especially when you're telling stories about your life. I think memoirs are like that, where you can kind of touch a lot of people and reach out to them with your story, with your very specific, detailed life, which is really cool that you want to do that. I'm wondering, because you have to be very vulnerable in writing a book, and also you're really letting people in, as you're saying, a lot of these stories will be surprising to your fans. How does it feel to sort of like bare your soul like that? Was it a scary process? And I'm also wondering how how is it different from the kind of soul bearing that you do on stage? I mean, we kind of make ourselves vulnerable as actors, but we have
well, you have the safety of a character, right? So like, I've been very lucky to get to do some things where I got to be, Hedwig was a real, that was very fun to do. It felt very personal, but I was playing a role. Falsettos was another one that I felt very close to, but that wasn't me. That was a different character. So this is by far the most personal thing that I've ever had to do, and I'm nervous. I'm not gonna lie. Some people have read it, and I've gotten some lovely feedback. I was probably most terrified to share it with my family, because what mother wants to read about her son's loss of virginity? Like, nobody wants to really, she doesn't need to hear that. But she read it. She sure did read about it. It's a lot of things that she was like, huh, interesting. So that's probably like that was the scariest thing. So I'm excited, but I am nervous, because this is a lot of information, a lot of personal information. How do you feel about it?
Well, I'm in the book.
You're like
and I got to read the book when he first finished writing it, and I have to tell you guys, it's so incredibly moving, and it's funny, and it's heartbreaking, and it's kind of inspiring, and I think it's going to take you on this amazing ride. And I am so proud of you about this book that I'm not going to gush too much, because I think I might actually be Andrew Rannells' #1 fan. I'm sure some of you would argue with that, but it's this incredible book, and I think one of the things that I was so touched by is that all of us who appear in your book, your family, your friends, the kind of people who make up these formative stories, I feel like you treated us with such a loving touch. I feel like when I read about myself, I actually was very moved, because I sort of saw myself in the way that you see me, which is actually, it's very sweet, and I feel like I got to know our friendship from a different side. So I think that all of the people that you talk about in your book will be moved, and I don't think you have to worry about about anybody getting upset. But I do think that you're very vulnerable in it, which is, I think, the way to make art that moves people. So I'm proud of you, and I'm excited to see how you change people's lives with this book right here.
Can you see why I brought her today? I was like, who should interview me?
But I'm wondering actually, who do you think, when you were writing, who did you imagine that you were writing for, or rather, who do you want to sort of get this book? Like, who do you think it's going to impact?
You guys. I thought about you. I thought about the stage door. I thought about people that I meet at the stage door, and who I was at your age, waiting by stage doors. Like, this is by no means any sort of like shortcut or workbook or anything about how to be on Broadway. It's more just, they're just stories about sort of how I slowly pieced together a life and a career here in New York. And there's some wins in this book, and there's a lot of losses in this book. And but I thought about you, and I thought about my nieces and nephews who are around your ages, and what I would have liked to have known. Not that you listen to advice at all, because I was a teenager at one point, and I hated advice from people, particularly older people. So I don't expect you to listen, but maybe just hearing some of my experiences, and you might recognize yourself in some of these stories or in some of these situations. And I guess that's what I just wanted to share, that I had been there and I got through to the other side of all of that nonsense, and the hard times, and I just wanted to, share some of those stories with you. So I guess that's what I was mainly thinking about, were you really very loyal, very excited Broadway fans. Because I got to tell you, I've had the great fortune of doing, television and working in a couple movies and things like that. But I'm certainly the most comfortable here in New York on stage. And the fact that you all come to the show and you're at the stage door and you're like that, you don't get that on television or in a movie theater. So I feel like it's a very special relationship that you all create with those of us who are working on Broadway. So thank you very much for that.
I was going to ask you that. What makes Broadway fans special, and I think you answered that.
Well, you do get very creative gifts. Yes. Susanna's scenes are like,
I've seen
dolls.
Some dolls, yeah.
Sarah, yes. Dolls, ducks. A lot of those bobbleheads. Things with your face on it that you never thought you would see. Never. Life-size cutouts of yourself. It's really creative. It's very creative.
That's great. I wonder if, now that you're an author as well as an actor, how hard is writing? Is it like, did you find it to be something that kind of blew your mind as far as sitting down? It takes a lot of discipline, which I know Andrew's a pretty disciplined guy, so you got it done.
I got it done. I really liked it. I liked the process. It's a very isolated activity, working at all as an actor. You're always surrounded by a lot of people. Even doing rehearsing Hedwig, there was always like 3 extra people in the room. It's not like I was ever alone. And this, you're really just by yourself. You just sit down and you just gotta do it. But I found myself really enjoying that process and that quiet time, and a lot of it I wrote while I was filming this movie, A Simple Favor, in Toronto. So I was working up in Toronto, but I wasn't working every day, so I would have like a couple days off in the middle of the week sometimes, and I would just sit in my hotel and just write out these essays. And my great editor, Matt Inman, who's here somewhere, he's here around somewhere, there he is in the back. We just sort of exchanged these essays back and forth, but I really found that I liked the process. I liked the sort of solitude of it, if you can just make yourself do it, but you do have to just sit down and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I know that these guys are your big, I don't know, what's the biggest sort of a project of Andrew's that everybody is in love with? Are we going? That's great.
Big Mouth, that's nice.
That's great. And you have a new show coming out this.
I do have a new show
It's
called.
going to be airing next weekend, right?
Yes, next Sunday. It's called Black Monday. Yes, which I'm very excited about. It's me and Don Cheadle and Regina Hall and Paul Scheer and Casey Wilson, and it all takes place in 1980s New York, where we all work on Wall Street. It's a very sort of wacky. Look at our clock. There's a clock up here, you guys. It's a wacky comedy. That I'm very excited about. So
I've seen it.
You've seen it?
I don't know if I was allowed to see it, but I saw it, and it was so good, you guys.
Well, the first episode, I don't know if it's still out, but it was on YouTube for Showtime released it a little. It might not be on anymore, but they released the pilot just as a little like tease. And if you look very closely, Michael James Scott is also, who's in the Book of Mormon with me, and also is now playing the genie in Aladdin. He is in there. And if you continue to watch Jason Michael Snow, who I also did the Book of Mormon with, he also makes a big appearance in several episodes. So even though we filmed it in Los Angeles, it was nice to get some Broadway folk in there, right? Right?
Yeah. Who do you think is the most fun person on Broadway to hang out with?
To hang out with?
Yeah.
Well, it's nice because, Celia Keenan Bolger. Yes. You like her. I mean, Gavin and I have been friends for almost as long as we've been friends.
Yeah.
So Gavin Creel is like, he's a real good time. And Cameron Adams is really, she's a good time, kids. She's over at My Fair Lady. We met doing Hairspray and have been friends ever since. She's a real riot. I feel like I'm probably missing some people, but I sometimes will, throw Zuzana into the mix of like these very loud musical theater people, and you always hold your own. Very proud of you.
Yeah, I'm not a singer, and so I get to witness a lot of singer energy a lot.
That for any parents who are here, it's, that musical theater energy.
I'll tell you what, the worst thing to do is to do karaoke with Andrew, because you don't get a chance at the mic. You don't. You're over there looking for your song. I'll be looking for my song, and then, type it in, and it's like 13 songs down.
I'd like to sing.
But yeah, no, that you do. I was actually going to ask you that because I have, as an actor who is not a singer, I think we've talked about acting before as being like acting, right? And so I don't think there's a world of difference between the kind of approach that you use to act in a musical as you do in a straight play. But I'm kind of wondering what the magical part of acting in song is. To me, it seems like it would be really cathartic and really like a direct line to your audience. Like, can you talk a little bit about how it feels to get up there and just belt?
Yeah. I mean, I love it. It's what makes me, probably happiest performing is doing musicals, because it is a very special sort of marriage of storytelling and probably most importantly to me was doing the Book of Mormon and every night getting to sing I Believe was sort of the biggest thrill I could have ever experienced, because it was this really intense marriage of storytelling and then song. And you also, I feel like the audience, I don't know, no offense to the straight actors, but I feel like when you're singing a great song, I feel like the audience is focused in a way that they sometimes are not maybe in a play. In my personal experience. But the song has to be great. And Bobby Lopez and Trey and Matt wrote this incredible song. So it was really such a gift to get to stand on stage and do that every night, because it really did feel like, for me, was the most powerful moment in my show, to get to share that. So, but yeah, when you're doing falsettos was like that too. Like, I grew up listening to that original cast recording and hearing Stephen Bogarta sing Games I Play, and like I just loved that song so much. So to get to do that on stage, and there's something emotionally that you can sort of access differently while singing. Although I will say it's hard to sing and cry. That's really hard because your throat sort of closes off, so you can't really.
It's
that's
like eating and crying.
Yeah, it's like eating and crying. Well, that comes easily sometimes. That's not so bad. But yeah, singing and crying is a little hard. But I absolutely, I think that's why I keep coming back to do musicals, is because that's just where I feel most at home and most satisfied.
Yeah, I get real jealous watching. So I'm like, I want to get up there and just sing.
Belt it out.
But I have to tell you, because you brought up Book of Mormon and what that song, I Believe, meant to you. And for me, as your bestie, and watching your career, like in this book, you can kind of see that, you know, all of Andrew's friends kind of came around, you know, around him as he got that Broadway debut, and it was like it's huge for us, almost as it was for him to see him kind of break through. And I remember watching Book of Mormon, and the first time that I ever saw it in the Broadway theater, and that first ding dong, like, you know, because there was the kind of the Mormon part with the scrim and the whole thing, and then that went up, and then there was the ding dong, and then it was just Andrew in the spotlight, you know, and I was hysterical, just sobbing like a hysterical. I don't have a count for how many times I saw Book of Mormon, but I definitely know I was the most crying person to ever see Book of Mormon. It's this totally funny play, and I would just sob my way through it every time. And I actually was in a friend's car not too long ago, and she had the soundtrack, and she played it, and I heard the first ding dong, and I immediately started to cry. Because I got like classically conditioned like a Pavlov dog. Yeah, basically. But anyway, I know that first ding dong for me, it meant that not only were you going to do this incredible work that, you know, tell this story and just kill it on stage and be an amazing actor and make magic in that room, but also that it was changing your life and that you were going to have a chance to you know, have this huge career and make all of these other great projects. And I could feel all of that in that little ding dong. So I wanted to ask you about your kind of the process of Book of Mormon and what that ding dong felt like to you.
Well, Susanna, funny you should ask about the ding dong. You know, that year, I'll try to make this as brief as possible. That year, I had made this commitment in my career that I had replaced in 2 Broadway shows, but I wanted to originate in a Broadway show. So I was auditioning a lot, just for new stuff. So that year, I had done a workshop of Little Miss Sunshine that James Lapine and Bill Finn wrote. I did, which is great. And I did Lysistrata Jones with Patty Murin. We did that. And then after Lysistrata Jones, I auditioned for this thing called the Untitled South Park musical. That everyone knew was about Mormons, but you weren't really allowed to hear too much about it, and they wouldn't even release the script to anybody, so I had to go to the casting director's office and sit in a conference room and read it really quickly, and then give it back to them. They wouldn't, and they took my phone, like they wouldn't let me have like any technology with me. So when it was happening, I was very excited about it, but I didn't really know what it was, and I learned a couple parts of songs, and it all happened kind of fast. It was cast, like I was cast in this part in like probably a week or so. Like it went very quickly, and then all of a sudden we were doing this workshop. So it took a while. It took until after the last workshop we did for it to sort of catch up to me, to be like, oh hell, this is actually going to happen on Broadway. Because the whole time we were doing it, it felt like I was in that zone of like, well, we're just doing this thing and I'm just making it, and there was no time, and I think I was the only principal to be replaced. So everybody else knew what they were doing. And then I was this new guy that had to come in. And for those of you who know the show, it was such a mean thing to do to me, but I understand why they did it. On the first day of when everybody came together, they made me sing, it was You and Me, but mostly me, but it was a solo. The Josh wasn't in it yet, and it was very high and very loud, and but they were like, Andrew, why don't you just sing this for the cast? Basically, it's like a prove yourself.
Wow.
So there I was at 10 a.m. And I was like, well, I gotta win these people over, because I could tell, anytime an actor gets replaced in a process like that, it's a little tricky because friendships are made and relationships are made, but I had like that one song to win them over.
Yeah.
And I guess I did because they were all very sweet to me after that. But it was a very stressful process. It wasn't really until like opening night, which you were at with my mother and my sister, that then I was like, oh, I think this is going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
I think this might be a big deal, this show.
Yeah, I could feel it. You know, I knew it was going to be a big deal though when I saw because I saw like a workshop that you guys did in another space. I think it was like at Juilliard or something.
Juilliard, yeah.
And they did the workshop, but they were...
The closest I ever came to going to Juilliard. was rehearsing there.
Me too. That's the closest I ever came was watching you rehearse there. But you were doing it in the workshop, and it was like kind of in street clothes and stuff, but there was that number in the show where the guys had and they had the like glitter vests, and they did that like little piece of stage business in the workshop. And I remember like when they did that move, and I was like, this is gonna change America. I was like, this is the best, because I just knew it was so good. And I remember everyone around me at the workshop was just like, this is just incredibly good. It was funny and it was smart, but it was just brilliant. And the stuff.
It was an original story, which is, sometimes at that time was very rare that it wasn't, based on anything or based on a film or so. And in that, nobody knew what it was going to be. Yeah.
Well, you had a chance to be not just in Book of Mormon, which I think was like a huge revolutionary piece of contemporary theater, but then also in Hamilton, which kind of did the same thing. How did that feel like? And you popped into that, all Hamilton.
That was really weird because it was, I had put in a request for house seats and it was denied because they were like, can you try again in like a month because there's just like so many people. It was about to open. And then I got a phone call and an email from Lin-Manuel Miranda saying like, do you want to, Jonathan Groff has to film this thing, would you want to come in and just do it for like 5 weeks? And I hadn't seen it. But I said, I was like, 5 weeks? He was like, it's like, you're only on stage for like 9 minutes, but you get like a really good song. And I said, okay. I was like, but I should probably see it first. So my house seat request was denied, but maybe could you give me a ticket? So they got me a ticket, and I went to go see it, and then but I said yes without knowing what it was.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, obviously the show is incredible, but the cast recording hadn't come out. There were you couldn't find any sort of like bootleg things from the public. There was just nothing out there. I don't condone bootlegs. You know who you are. But so I just didn't know, but I was like, well, I think it's probably safe to be like, yeah, I'll do it. So I said, that's probably, as an actor, maybe not like the best move to say yes before you know what it is, but I felt confident.
Well, you were really, really good in it, and my favorite part of it was that because of you were in it, I got to go see it. So I saw a matinee, and I was like...
That was like my whole family. They're very good about coming from Nebraska to see shows, but they all came to Hamilton.
Yes, they did. So what about revivals? I think, am I wrong about, I think the other big Broadway projects that you've done have been revivals, right?
Yeah.
Is there any show that you would like to see revived? Is there something out there that you're in love with that you can put into the universe?
I was put into the universe falsettos for a long, long time.
Yeah.
So the fact that happened was pretty unbelievable. And I'm so grateful that it happened. And it really all came about in a really sort of silly way. That I did another